see everybody and you can see me. Okay, so this is Detoxification, Natural Solutions for Cleansing. So in today's world, we are bombarded by substances that are toxic and are contributing to chronic illnesses and degenerative diseases. The body has a really great ability to protect itself, but we are in an environment that is more toxic than it ever has been before. So we need to be supporting our bodies naturally to handle all of that. There are increased risks that we are now linking in medical literature between toxic exposure and disease. So this is a topic that is really important, and I'm excited to share it with you. So we've got detoxification, natural solutions for cleansing. So a little bit about me. If you don't know me, I am a naturopathic doctor. I own a clinic called Verger Wellness Clinic, and we are located in Uptown Waterloo. It's a team of nutritionists, naturopath, myself, massage therapy, counseling services, and chiropractics soon to come. So we are a healthcare team, and we treat people with a team-based approach. I myself have a major in physiology and a major in psychology, which would be the body and mind connection. That was what I did my undergraduate in. I then went on to naturopathic college and became a naturopathic doctor, and I've been practicing going on to my 4th year in Kitchener-Waterloo, which is just, time is flying. A reminder that the information that I present to you in this webinar today is for informational purposes, and the slides are intellectual property of myself and the company. So what you'll learn, we are going to talk about what detox actually is. As I mentioned at the beginning, you've maybe heard of what a cleanse is, or you've probably heard of detox in some capacity, and that's why you're here. But we're going to talk more so about what the processes are and the organs that are involved and what's going on in your body. We're going to talk about signs and symptoms and some conditions and what we can do to help. And then I'm going to give you some tools to get you started with some natural solutions. So what is detoxification? Detoxification is the process by which bioaccumulation of toxins and toxicant substances, such as things that we're exposed to today, like pesticides, heavy metals, chemicals that are airborne from car exhaust, food additives, dyes in our clothing, chemicals in our furniture, even hormones and excess hormone exposure. These are all considered to be toxicant substances, and detoxification is the process by which your body eliminates these toxins from the body to improve function and to prevent illness. Detox is already occurring in your body. So, you know, a lot of people will say, oh, I need to do a detox. Well, your body is already doing detox. It's already detoxifying. It's a naturally occurring process. The trouble is that we're bombarded by a lot more toxicant substances these days, and so these processes may not be enough, and we'll talk more. So what is toxemia? Toxemia is actually when there is a high and dangerous level of toxins that are in the blood. So, you know, we have this process, detoxification, which is actually preventing us from getting into a state of toxemia, which is where we see toxin levels that are dangerously high in the blood. So what is a toxin? Right? We're talking a lot about toxins and toxicants, and we need to know what these things are. So a toxin is defined as an antigenic poison or venom of a plant or animal, and especially one that is derived from microorganisms and is especially harsh on the body when it's at low concentrations. At low concentrations, it may cause disease. So I gave you some examples of things that you may come across, and maybe you haven't, some more common examples. Things like stinging nettle, that comes from a plant, it is actually would be considered a toxin under this definition. Snake venom, that's, you know, a little bit more of an obvious one, but probably a little bit more rare. Botox, botulinum toxin used in rejuvenation, cosmetic procedures, so that's considered a toxin. Bacterial byproducts are one that, so produced by bacteria, microorganism, producing something called a Shiga toxin. And Shiga toxins are very harsh on the body. They're very inflammatory, and they are actually a toxin. Endotoxins, which are also made by bacteria within the microbiome. In this definition, we could also consider hormone metabolites to be a toxin in your body. If there is an excess buildup of hormone metabolites, some of these hormones are actually quite detrimental to DNA, and that would be considered a toxin. We're also talking about oxidation, oxidative stress. When we talk about toxins, your body, just in being able to do its normal functions of cellular respiration and energy production, creates things called reactive oxygen species. And these reactive oxygen species require antioxidants to help neutralize them. This would be considered cellular toxicity. Even things such as herbal remedies and their constituents would be considered a toxin as well. Toxicant is a substance that is introduced to the human body from the environment, and it can be either synthetic, so man-made, or a naturally occurring environmental toxin. So things like BPA from plastics, parabens, which are found in beauty products, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide from cars, lead and heavy metal production, medications, solvents that are used in industry, things like mold and pesticides that are on our food, and other chemical exposure. So these are actually called toxicants. For simplicity, I am going to mostly say the word toxin, but you know that I am talking about toxins and toxicants. So what happens? When we, basically we have something called an exposure, and the exposure is when a substance, so a toxin or a toxicant, comes in contact with a person. What happens in the body is that the toxin, come in contact with that exposure, it's distributed throughout the body metabolizes that toxin, and then it excretes it. So that's the generalized process about what is going on in your body when you do come in contact with a toxic substance. Detoxification is, as I said earlier, it is something that our bodies are doing right now. It is a natural process, and we have an amazing ability as humans to be able to handle a significant amount of toxins, which is great because our environment and our lifestyles are becoming more and more toxic. We have nutrients that are required in order to effectively detoxify our body. And we are going to talk about those more specifically, but just introducing the concept right now that detox is actually a very nutrient dependent process. It's very important that your body has all of the nutrients required in order to effectively eliminate, metabolize, and excrete. So we have an intrinsic ability to synthesize some of these nutrients. So we have the ability to actually build things like fatty acids and make our own vitamins like vitamin K, and to synthesize proteins in our body. However, we also have extrinsic requirements. So we require, through our nutritional intake, some essential vitamins, minerals, fatty acids, and amino acids. So some of what our body needs to detox, we can make, but some we need to actually consume. Detox is not a new trend. It has been around for years. So again, speaking to the tradition of detoxification, it has been around for centuries, if not longer. It's a really a really, old process. People and cultures have been detoxifying in some capacity for years and years, and we'll talk about some examples. But in the roots of detoxification, there was also incorporation of more of an emotional and a spiritual cleanse, as well as physical cleansing. And many cultures around the world practice detoxification in different ways, and there are cultural influences on these practices. So some of these practices are listed here. These are some fairly common ones, and ones that I think you might be able to that may resonate with you, maybe you've heard of before. So the indigenous people's use of sweat lodges and smudging. This is, a method of detoxifying the physical body and also cleansing the body of negative emotions and spirits. Scandinavian hydrotherapy is a type of water therapy where it usually requires cold and hot water pools, and alternating between these cold and hot water pools. That's been around for many years in that tradition. European staining and lustration. So staining and lustration are two terms that are used in Scottish culture to describe basically a smudging type of ceremony where it's a cleansing of emotions and spirits and negative, and lustration, which is bathing in seawater as a cleansing method. So it's in, Scottish tradition. South American use of hallucinogenic and purgative herbs, things like ayahuasca, peyote. These are herbs that have been used for years as a journey through cleansing the body, again, of spirits and emotions, but also obviously, it's a purgative, so very much a physical purge and cleanse as well. Harvesting dandelion greens in the spring. This is something that we see here in North America. It's also very common in European countries like in Holland and Netherlands. And basically, as these plants grow in springtime, it is a fabulous time of year to actually start consuming more of them, harvesting them from the wild and consuming those dandelion greens, which are so great for gallbladder and liver support. And then even fasting, which may not seem like it's an actual detox, but it definitely is a method of detoxifying the body. Fasting dates back as far as Hippocrates, so many, many years ago. So long story short, this is not a new thing that we're talking about. Many cultures and many people have known that detoxifying is good for our body, and that it is really something that we should be doing almost annually. So even more so important nowadays, because our world is so different than it was hundreds of years ago. We're seeing connections between toxins and toxicants and degenerative diseases and chronic diseases, and rates of both toxic exposure and degenerative and chronic diseases are on the rise. And so some examples that have been connected to toxicity include autoimmunity. I see a lot of thyroid patients that are developing autoimmune thyroid conditions, and it's related to a toxic exposure. Things like dementia and multiple sclerosis, which have been linked to heavy metal toxicity, diabetes, obesity, cancer. These are oxidative stress states. Our bodies aren't able to handle the foods and the toxic load. So we're seeing rises in these types of conditions, and there is a lot of research focus on linking specific toxicants and toxins to these diseases. So it tells us that we need to be supporting our bodies. And so we do have, as I said, we do have this system in place, so our body is prepared to handle a lot. And these are the organs that are involved. So the liver, I've bolded and capitalized the liver because it is so important for detoxification. We're going to spend a lot of time talking specifically about the liver. But the liver then detoxes and excretes, and the kidneys and the colon are also very important key players in your detoxification pathway. We also have the skin and the lymph, which are two systems that people sometimes forget about. A lot of emphasis is put on the liver, and there's actually a lot of detoxification that comes from skin and lymph mobilization. So we'll talk a little bit about those too. The liver is the most important organ of metabolism. It has hundreds of enzymes that are breaking down substances, metabolizing chemicals, breaking down hormones, breaking down toxins. And so, it's a really, really big system of metabolism. And the liver also is manufacturing things too. It's making proteins and fats and carbohydrates. It's making vitamins and turning them into their active form. An example of that would be, I would say about 5 or 6 years ago, folic acid has been a really big focus in the naturopathic world. And that's because in order for folic acid to be active within the body, it needs to be turned on through a process called methylation. And not everybody is able to methylate. And that methylation and that activation occurs within the liver. So it's literally involved in activating some of our vitamins. It stores many vitamins and minerals because it's using them for detoxification. The liver is also creating bile salts, and that is really important for excreting fat-soluble toxins. The liver also is breaking down red blood cells and white blood cells and bacteria in our body and in the Kupffer cells. So the liver is just like this powerhouse of metabolism and destruction and rebuilding and synthesis. And of course, as I mentioned, it is breaking down chemicals and drugs and all of those substances. So the liver has something called the first pass effect. And this is a little bit of information about the first pass effect. I want you to know this because it's important that you know when things go into your body, how much actually gets broken down by the liver. So you can see here, if you were to swallow a medication or a substance, a food, a supplement, you swallow 100% of that. It goes through the stomach, it gets into the small intestine, and in the small intestine, we have something called the portal vein. So this is bringing blood flow to the liver, and the liver, the hepatic portal circulation is filtering through the liver, and the liver breaks down those substances very substantially to a level of about only 15% is actually left after a substance goes through first pass effect. So this means that anything that is consumed orally is being broken down quite substantially by the liver. First pass effect does vary. It can be as low as 15%. For some substances, it's a little higher amount that gets into the bloodstream. Point being, the liver is really important in metabolizing, and it is that first pass effect that makes oral consumption not always the best option for people. So using something like a transdermal, so a through the skin type of delivery method, an intramuscular or a sublingual route of administration actually bypasses the first pass effect, which is great when we're trying to do something like an increase of B12 level in someone who's deficient. The liver, as I mentioned, is very important for metabolism. So I thought it would be important to talk a little bit about what metabolism actually is. So it's a chemical process by which substances are turned into their byproducts, which makes it easier for them to be excreted. So it's that transformation that happens in the liver that is, important to get rid of all of that toxic stuff, as well as natural stuff like hormones and fat-soluble vitamins and that type of thing. Metabolism is naturally occurring. The thing that's important is that the higher our toxic load gets, the more nutrients our metabolism within our liver actually requires. So this is what it really means to actually support detoxification. The liver metabolism has two phases. So phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 involves oxidation, reduction, hydrolysis. Those are the main biochemical processes that are occurring in the body. And basically, your toxin comes in, which is fat soluble, and the liver, phase 1, breaks that down into an inert substance. Phase 2, which requires lots of amino acids for phase 2 conjugation, takes that inert fat-soluble toxin and helps to turn it into a water-soluble form that is then excreted. So you can see in this image here that I've blown up from the last slide, the liver is going through step 1 and step 2, so phase 1 and phase 2, which helps to turn those toxins into waste products. Those waste products are eliminated from the body through gallbladder and bile, and then out through the bowels. And we do see some fat-soluble toxins that are excreted that way as well, but then also through the kidneys and through the urine. So your colon and your kidneys are very important key players for allowing the liver to actually detox, package all that stuff up, and then excrete it out of the body. I like to think of phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification as pouring water into an urn. You're pouring water into the urn in phase 1, and if we don't have a good drainage hole at the bottom of that urn, we can actually see this overflow that develops if we are pouring toxins in, but we're not able to get the toxins out, if that makes sense. So we have a good ability to process these toxins, but if our body is overburdened, if we have a high toxic load, or if we have poor detoxification ability, then we see this overflowing, and that's when symptoms really start to show up. So there are some things that can speed up the rate of detoxification and slow the rate down, and these are called inducers and inhibitors. Inducers speed up the rate of detoxification for that specific phase, and inhibitors slow that rate down. So things like B vitamins and vitamin C and magnesium, they're actually speeding up phase 1. So they're helping to clear those toxins out of the body. But what can happen, especially on a patient that's not necessarily eating a very healthy diet that's got lots of amino acids, lots of minerals, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, we can end up with some relative nutrient deficiencies. So relative deficiencies of things like B vitamins and zinc deficiency, and even amino acids from not getting enough protein in the diet, that can actually plug the system. So it would plug that cistern or that urn up and would prevent it from being able to drain. And so what we see is this overflow effect. And so when we're working on a medical detoxification with patients, we're really looking at, are they phase 1 detoxifying, but are they also phase 2 detoxifying? Because they might be really good at phase 1, but now their system is overflowing. And so we also have to think about something called phase 3, which is, maybe I've kind of coined the term, but I think it's pretty commonly used in the naturopathic world. And phase 3 detoxification really revolves around those kidneys and the colon. So they are your excretion pathways. So we have those two phases in the liver. Phase 3 is the final exit routes. As I mentioned earlier, fat-soluble toxins, which are would be non-polar substances, are excreted through feces using bile from the gallbladder. Water-soluble toxins, which are the polar substances, they are excreted by the kidneys and also through the feces as well. We know that there's lots of water in feces as well, but kidneys, very much water-soluble toxins are there. The microbiome, so I'm including this as part of phase 3 as well, because it's Your microbiome is very much influencing your ability to detoxify as well. Specifically, an example would be when patients are not excreting, they're not eliminating through the bowels regularly, and their microbiome is actually imbalanced, we can see something called a reuptake of estrogens. So literally the bacteria in that colon are creating something called beta-glucuronidase, which deconjugates the estrogen that was on its way out of the body. So it basically allows that estrogen to be reabsorbed back into the body, creating more of that estrogen dominance picture. So that's, that is, I include the microbiome as one of my phase 3 systems as well. And so your microbiome, just a reminder, is the organisms that live inside the human gastrointestinal tract, all the way from your mouth to your bum. That's your whole microbiome. You might consider the skin to be part of your microbiome as well, especially if there are chronic skin infections, skin conditions, dermatitis, etc. So these are things that I look at with patients so we can actually measure and quantify and assess the bacteria of the microbiome using stool cultures and stool DNA testing, which is pretty cool. The kidneys. So let's talk about that as one of our organs of phase 3 detoxification. So the kidneys are involved in a process called glomerular filtration and excretion. Basically, it's filtering of blood and then also filtering of plasma and water. And that helps to reabsorb water back into the body, helps to control chemicals. Drugs are excreted through the kidneys. Some drugs are. And it also controls electrolyte balance. So things like sodium and potassium excretion are controlled in part by the kidneys. The kidneys have really small blood vessels within them, and that's called microvasculature. Those really small blood vessels can become damaged when blood sugars and cholesterol levels are elevated. So this would reduce your ability to filter blood through that microvasculature pipe because there's just, that pipe is so small now that you can't actually pull fluid through it as effectively. So it can damage the kidneys in some of these conditions, and therefore, reducing your ability to detoxify. Some medications, herbs, and chemicals are also nephrotoxic. So if you've been on a chronic medication, it's definitely something that you want to talk to your doctor about is, are these affecting my kidneys? Because some medications, as I mentioned, are nephrotoxic, which means toxic to the kidneys. There are genetic conditions which also can contribute to nephrotic diseases, so where there's actually protein that's spilling into the urine as a result of a genetic disease. I would say these are more rare, but they are present and people do have them. And the way that we can look at how the kidneys are functioning is by doing urinalysis, so just a urine test, but also blood testing for creatinine and EGFR levels. So the rate of filtration. We can actually look at that rate of glomerular filtration and determine whether or not there is adequate filtration that's happening with the kidneys. With the colon, which was another one of our phase 3 organs, it houses trillions of bacteria. That is your microbiome. It is a major route of elimination of fat-soluble toxins and bile. And the microbiome and the colon are also responsible for making vitamins such as vitamin K. So there's a lot going on in your colon, and your microbiome absolutely influence your ability to get rid of substances and, to make enough vitamin substances for some vitamins. This is one of the most important takeaways, is that if there is ineffective elimination, so if people are constipated, we are not ready to even begin a detox protocol of any kind until we have addressed that constipation. So if we are ineffectively eliminating every day, at least once a day, with an easy bowel movement, your body is not in a state to start doing anything upstream from that. It's basically like unplugging the sewer pipe. Sorry for the analogy, but it's we want the sewer pipe to be flowing before we start to dump all of that excess water from upstream, all of those toxins and hormones and all of those chemicals and medications. Before we mobilize and dump any of that stuff into the system, we need to make sure that we are eliminating. So constipation is the number one priority if if we're thinking about starting and addressing detoxification. Skin. So skin is another organ of detoxification. It's our largest organ in our body, covers us head to toe, and it is an absorptive surface. So I like to remind patients that what goes on goes in. So if you're slathering yourself in, scented lotions and perfumes and antiperspirants that are scented, and sunscreens and hairsprays and shampoo and conditioner and all of these things have chemicals in them, your skin has that exposure. And remember what happens with exposure. We get distribution of those chemicals through the bloodstream. We get metabolism by the liver, and then we have to have excretion as well. So those, if we are not excreting, eliminating, pooping, if we are not metabolizing, or if we've run out of resources for effective metabolism by the liver, then we are not in a position to be distributing all of these chemicals in our body. So that is, a really good lifestyle takeaway, is reduce as much as you can the toxic stuff that you're exposed to. Your skin secretes things. It obviously secretes oils. You know that, but it also secretes minerals. So when you get sweaty, you get salty. Your skin is actually secreting sodium chloride. You are also able to secrete water-soluble substances through the skin as well. So it is an organ. It's absorbing and secreting. Sweating is one of the best things that we can do to help increase detoxification through the skin. Truthfully, it doesn't really matter how you sweat. Exercise is great, but if you're not able to exercise, doing something like a sauna or even some hydrotherapy is another viable option. I also want you to know, as a resource, just at the bottom of this slide, I have the EWG.org. That EWG is Environmental Working Group. They are a fabulous resource that I suggest everybody goes and takes a look at. And they are basically a database where you can plug in your L'Oreal shampoo, and it will give you a rating of the toxic or not so toxic quality of that product. So, if there are any carcinogenic substances that are in the products, if there's any hormone disrupting substances in your products, you can look it up. And you can look up personal care products like shampoos and lotions. You can also look up household products like cleaners and laundry detergents and that type of thing. So it's a really great resource to start to understand how much toxin you're actually, toxicant, using the proper word, you're actually exposed to every day. So take a look at that. Lymph. This is our last organ of detoxification. So the lymphatic system is similar to the vascular system. It's made up of vessels and nodes and fluids. The thing is, it doesn't have a heart to pump it. So like our cardiovascular system, we have a heart, and it pumps at high pressure through our arteries and then circulates through the veins. Our lymphatic system doesn't have that heart beating to move lymphatic flow. So lymphatic flow requires physical movement Sorry, I don't know what happened there. I'm just going to restart the presentation from where we were. And it seems like the signal dropped, but we'll get it back. Okay, so we were talking about the lymphatic flow. So especially when there are skin swelling around the ankles, swelling of the feet, swelling in the hands, it's really important to consider your lymphatic system. Skin infections are another big sign of poor lymphatic flow. So if you're experiencing a lot of infections, think about moving your body more and stimulating that lymphatic flow by exercising, walking, even dry skin brushing, which is a tool that we're going to give you as one of your 5-day challenge, the bonus resources that I'll send out after this is done. But you'll learn more about dry skin brushing. It's really helpful at moving the lymph fluid. Contrast hydrotherapy, so the use of hot water and cold water, alternating between hot and cold, helps to move lymphatic flow. Even things like rebounding, which is kind of fun. And some of my patients actually jump on their little rebounding trampoline. Really great way to move your lymph. So that's another option. So detoxification requires a lot of nutrients. We've talked about how the liver uses a lot of these nutrients in order to effectively deal with all of those substances. B vitamins are one of the most important supplements that I recommend when I am trying to increase detoxification. These B vitamins act as methyl donors. So they're really good at contributing a methyl group in order to create an inert toxic substance. So they kind of neutralize the substances. Vitamin C, magnesium, zinc, copper, and iron are all required in order to do phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. Glutathione is your master antioxidant. Your liver needs and uses tons of glutathione. And glutathione is synthesized from something called N-acetylcysteine, which is an amino acid. So we need to be making enough glutathione. And in some cases, we actually supplement with glutathione if we're not getting enough in the body to handle that toxic burden. Amino acids, fatty acids, your omega fatty acids, things like bile, as I mentioned, from the gallbladder, really important at actually taking those toxins and getting them out of the body. Fiber and water. Fiber because we need the colon moving, water because we need the kidneys filtering, and we need to be urinating. So we also use substances like antioxidants, which are found in high amounts in berries. Substances and antioxidants such as quercetin and sulforaphane are also used by the liver through detoxification. Quercetin is found in a number of fruits. It's great for allergies. And sulforaphane is found in brassica family vegetables. So broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts have a high concentration of sulforaphane. Interesting thing about sulforaphane is you actually have to break down by chewing the broccoli or the cruciferous veggie, you have to break that down by chewing in order to activate the sulforaphane component. So our bodies are so interesting how we can do these things, and we have these systems in place. We also, as I mentioned, we also need movement, we also need sweating, and we also have to think about our lymphatic system. So how do we know if someone needs to detox? Well, basically, we're looking at signs of toxicity. So if your body has a toxic burden where it's unable to properly handle all of those substances on its own, we start to see these symptoms develop. So headaches, nausea, diarrhea, and constipation, joint pain and muscle aches, fatigue, stimulant dependency. So people actually requiring more caffeine year after year, they just keep having more caffeine dependence. Sugar cravings and cigarette smoke. Cigarette smoking would be other signs that you need to consider doing a detox protocol. Rashes and infections is just buildup of these substances. Things like allergy and mucus production are another good clues, and then red eyes. So conditions in which detoxification can be really helpful, thyroid conditions. So I kind of alluded to this earlier, but thyroid conditions, the thyroid requires adequate amount of selenium and iodine. Selenium is used by your liver through detoxification, and it is required in the diet. And you get most of the highest concentration of selenium from Brazil nuts. So not everybody eats a lot of Brazil nuts. Not everyone's getting a therapeutic amount of selenium every day. But from a toxic perspective, we actually have seen a link between the halogen substances. The halogen, so on the periodic table, halogens or halogens are chlorine, bromine, and fluoride. And those substances displace iodine in the body. They're all in the same chemical family. And it is very common to see someone who's grown up with a pool, had a hot tub, uses fluoride toothpaste, maybe drinks fluoridated water, and has thyroid conditions, mostly hypothyroidism. So this is so prevalent in Southern Ontario that we've actually been called the goiter belt, because our soil is deficient in these nutrients. We're not getting iodine from our food. We don't have enough selenium in our soil to get that into our food. And so people are experiencing more hypothyroidism as a result of that. Another condition or class of conditions would be the hormonal changes that can occur. So dysmenorrhea is painful menstrual periods, and that generally is occurring. There's a number of reasons, but it can occur due to estrogen dominance. And that basically comes down to the inability to detoxify excess estrogens out of the body. Uterine fibroids are also associated with estrogen dominance. Premature puberty. So the age of puberty is declining in that children are younger and younger when they are going through puberty, to the point that we have some 9-year-olds that are actually reporting having their first menstrual period. So our genetics haven't changed that quickly. So it is absolutely our environment that is contributing to these changes. And specifically, it is the endocrine disrupting chemicals in our body, in our plastics, in our environment, but also things like birth control. Your body is processing excess hormones, urinating out metabolites. Those metabolites remain in water, and they are being found in different species. They're being found in fish, but we're also seeing this decrease in puberty onset and linking that to some of these endocrine changes. Gynecomastia for men would be an example where men start to develop breast tissue, and it's a result of having too much estrogen in their body as a result of endocrine disrupting chemicals, but also hormone metabolites that they are being exposed to. Infertility is another condition, or a kind of a class of condition where detoxification can be really helpful. Being burdened with toxic substances makes it harder for your cells to function. And when we talk about fertility, we're talking about a very microscopic process. We're talking about ovarian function and spermogenesis. So the development of these very, very small cells that are that have high amounts of DNA and need to have that DNA in a healthy state in order to make an embryo. So we definitely, infertility can be a sign or a reason to do a detox. Acne and dermatitis. Again, it's coming down to hormones and endocrine disrupting chemicals, toxic burden, and multiple chemical sensitivities. So this is a diagnosis where patients are very sensitive to scents and products, to the point that they develop hives and rashes and migraines that are debilitating, and fatigue levels skyrocket. It's a fairly severe condition, but it's definitely linked to toxic burden, and is a good, we really should be doing a detox with these patients. But you need to be gentle when you have multiple chemical sensitivity, because if you start unpacking all of that toxic load without the effective elimination pathways going, then you are like, that's just not a safe thing to do. So you need to work with a practitioner. And then also asthma and respiratory diseases, especially an area where there's a high amount of airborne pollutants, places where it's very smoggy. There's a lot of car exhaust and all of the byproducts such as nitrogen dioxide, which are hanging around in the air, and that can actually cause respiratory diseases. I saw, in my personal experience, I saw that when I was in Peru. We were working up in a shanty town doing a medical brigade, helping some people who were in a very low income area, who didn't have access to medical care, running water, proper sanitation. They were up on these hills in Lima, Peru, and up on the hills, it's very smoggy. So all of that pollution was actually sitting in that heavy smog, and these people developed lots of respiratory, chronic cough, asthma, even lung infections, very common there. So yeah, clean air is something that we should all be very thankful to have. So what does it mean to do a cleanse? Let's talk a little bit about cleansing. We have these amazing bodies. We've talked about how awesome our bodies are at handling toxic burden. So let's talk about what we can do to support our body. You've maybe heard of some of these before, but I wrote down some pretty common cleanses. So doing a juice cleanse or a juice fast or a soup cleanse or even the cabbage soup cleanse. You've maybe heard of those before. The master cleanse, which uses lemon water, cayenne pepper, and I believe honey in warm water, and that's all that people consume for a few days. That's the master cleanse. Colon cleansing or even colonics are a form of cleansing. Fasting, so intermittent fasting, but also going on a 2-3 day fast is a form of cleansing. Basically, doing a cleanse means that you are using a systematic approach to reducing the toxic burden on your body and promoting proper elimination. That's really what it means to do a cleanse. It's reducing the amount that you're exposed to and increasing the amount that you can get out. There's a number of ways in which you can do this. Here are some examples of fad style cleanses. I don't actually love any of these cleanses. I didn't mention the herbal cleanse. I do use herbs when I am helping patients cleanse. There's a number of different herbal cleanses. They can be okay, but the long story short, it's really all about reducing your toxic load, increasing excretion and elimination. So many of them are fads, as I said, and many of them are revolving around fasting. So many of these, like the juice cleanse, the soup cleanse, the cabbage soup cleanse, fasting itself, most cleanses that you see on the internet put people into a state of fasting. And when we're in fasting, we experience rapid fat loss. So when we fast, we go without food, our body gets into a state where it needs to use fat as a fuel. So it does something called fat mobilization. So it takes the body fat stores that you have and it allows, by breaking down through lipolysis, it allows those fats to be utilized for energy. The thing is, a lot of toxic substances are stored in fat. That's our body's way of safely handling the amount of toxins that are in our environment and in our bodies. It just stores them away, and as it can, it processes. So if we induce a fasting state, we induce fat mobilization. We are freeing up all of these toxins that were stored away in fat as our safety mechanism. Now, what happens, right? All those toxins are floating around in your bloodstream, and you know that it comes back to distribution, metabolism, excretion. So now your toxins are distributing throughout your body, and your liver has to metabolize, and then you have to excrete all of those toxins. This can be really hard on the body. I do not recommend doing any fasting until your bowels and your kidneys are really good at excreting, because we need to be able to get that stuff out of the body. Generally speaking, when I put patients on a detox protocol, I'm actually not getting them to do any fasting. Just by allowing their liver, their kidney, and their colon, as well as their skin and their lymphatic system, to process what's already in the body, we are going to be allowing more of those toxins to move through those organs. So fasting is not my favorite thing when it comes to cleansing. So what do we want to do when we do a cleanse? We want to basically, we want to look at a health assessment, look at symptoms, and look at the patient's current health status. We need to assess if a detox protocol is actually safe and indicated. We then talk about how to reduce exposures. You're going to get some of that information in the 5-day cleanse challenge that we are going to send out. So we will talk about how to reduce more of your exposure, but that is part of the process. We have to reduce what's coming into the body and coming in contact with the body. And then we also, as I mentioned, want to increase elimination and support excretion. This is, as a naturopath, I am able to connect specific diseases and conditions to certain toxic exposures, and that can give us some good clues about what we may or may not need to really focus on for that patient. There is testing available to help us determine whether or not we are in a toxic burden state, and to assess organ function. We'll talk about those tests in just a minute. The treatment plan comes down to requiring expert knowledge. I really do not recommend that patients take on their own, internet health detox or a cleanse that you read about online, because this could potentially be a very dangerous situation if these toxins are immobilized. You're putting a lot of stress on the liver, and that can be really harsh on the body. So I do recommend you work with a healthcare provider. It can be a functional medicine doctor, an environmental doc, who is specifically focused on environmental toxicity, and naturopathic doctors are also interested and trained in this topic. Treatment plans do vary between naturopaths, however, so remember that you always want to talk to the naturopath about what method they utilize and what their systems are, because each naturopaths may have a different approach. I use more of a nutraceutical and herbal botanical medicine style approach, but some naturopaths use homeopathics. So you want to know what you're going to get when you're signing up for a detox protocol with a naturopath. And it all comes down to safety. We want to make sure that we are being safe with our nutrients, safe with our vitamins, safe with our things like selenium, because these can be toxic at high doses. We also want to be safe with our herbs. We know that some herbs are actually toxic when taken in high doses or taken for too long. So naturopaths are trained in this toxicity and safety information. We also want to be safe about those processes. So we don't want to overburden the liver going through a fast if our excretion pathways are really not working well. So let's go back to testing. Testing is something that I do quite frequently, and you can do a number of tests to look at toxicity, but also at organ function. Things like liver function tests and urinalysis, looking at pH, are good tools to determine if the organs are ready to go through a detox program. If we have low liver function or low kidney function, that's our top priority before we start a detox. So it's good to check these things in advance, and then also periodically. Saliva and hormone testing gives us clues about hormone levels. So if there is that estrogen dominance or the building up of estrogens in both men and women, we can check that out using these methods. Stool testing is really important for when we're looking at microbiome, so bacteria, toxins. I've seen this in a number of my patients where they actually have a bacterium that is detrimental and is actually endotoxic to their intestine. We can identify that with a stool test. Urine and hair heavy metal testing helps to look at things like mercury levels, which are associated with multiple sclerosis, for example. So we can use urine and also hair testing. Normally when we do a hair testing, we actually have to snip very close to the root of the hair. We can't really use the ends of the hair. We need the root in order for it to be more accurate. SIBO testing, so that's small intestine bacterial overgrowth, that gives us more clues about the amount of microbial organisms that are in that small intestine that could be contributing to those to toxin production within your body. Organic acid, same thing. You get to look at levels of neurotransmitters that are being produced, vitamin markers, but also if there are microbes that are creating toxins like oxalates from candida. And lastly, which is not available in Ontario, unfortunately, but immunoassay testing. So this is testing that helps to identify antibodies for autoimmune conditions before a diagnosis. So it's early stage diagnostics. And I wanted to just let you know that this is available in some provinces like BC, where you can actually see very early stage levels of antibodies that are being produced in response to some kind of toxin that your immune system is trying to fight, basically. So the bare necessities of a cleanse, this is what is required in my opinion. So we have to reduce our toxic burden from food. That means basically eat organic. We have to increase nutrient availability from food. So we have to eat high quality foods that are nutrient dense. We have to reduce toxic exposure from environmental exposures. Things like plastics, household cleaners, personal care products, cooking Teflon surfaces, laundry detergents, industrial solvents, perfumes and hairspray, polymer solvents, other fumes and airborne toxins, and even medications. We are exposed to a lot of stuff, and we have to start to reduce that exposure. We also need to be mobilizing excretion through the kidneys and the colon. I think we've harped on that enough, and I think you know that that is really important now. And lastly, it's good to induce a fat mobilization state, such as fasting, ketosis that occurs during fasting, or even a low carbohydrate diet in order to allow those fats to slowly release toxins. But we're only doing that when everything else is in place. So get started today. What can you do? Take these tools with you, make some notes, make some mental notes. But this is what kind of the foundation of a detox protocol is. So we have to eliminate any known triggers, and we have to buy organic foods whenever possible. Our foods, unfortunately, are very much covered in pesticides. And if you're interested in learning more, I will send out the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen, which are lists of foods that you really should spend the money and buy organic whenever you can. We have to eliminate other toxins such as alcohol, sugar, processed foods, which contain dyes and stabilizers and additives. Even some grains can be toxic to the intestines, and fungal foods, things that can easily grow fungus or mold on the skin, or things like peanuts, for example, can actually develop toxins on the skin, and that is harsh on the body. We have to increase fiber intake and antioxidant-rich foods. We need to drink enough water. This is a big one, especially if there's constipation. Just try increasing your water intake and see if that gives you hydration in order to get those bowels going. But we need to be generally drinking more water when we're doing a cleanse than normal because we are excreting. We're getting rid of stuff. Eat more vegetables such as the cruciferous veggies because they're really good for the liver. That sulforaphane, your liver uses that. But also onions, garlic, nuts, and seeds. And those are really helpful for the liver because of their nutrients. Consider fasting only if you are excreting well. So we only want to introduce a juice or a soup type cleanse only if we are eliminating really, really well, especially through the bowels. Herbal medicine. So increase your consumption of leafy greens, greens of any kind, things like spinach, Brussels sprouts, mint, cilantro, parsley, those culinary herbs, even things like chlorophyll. Maybe you try some chlorella or some spirulina. Those are really powerful sea veggies and are really great sources of nutrients. We also want to increase consumption of some herbs. Things like dandelion, yellow dock, and burdock are really great at increasing liver and bile flow. They are also a gentle laxative, so they help to just cleanse the body through those liver and colon systems. Milk thistle, I love this because it's hepatoprotective. So patients that have fatty liver condition unrelated to alcohol or are having liver enzyme elevations, really great herb is milk thistle. It's very protective for the cells of the liver. And lastly, there are even lymphatic plants, and I do include these in some of my tinctures for patients. A great example would be gallium, which increases your lymphatic flow. Another tool for you is lifestyle. So as you are cleansing, you are putting your body through the works. So get plenty of rest and allow for downtime. And I include self-reflection and emotional support as part of these lifestyle tools because when you're cleansing, you're actually really, it can bring up a lot for people. Not only is it maybe harder on the body, it can, maybe people are not getting quite as much of their normal foods. You may have stopped caffeine, stopped and cut back on sugar. And for some people, those are really, they depend on that stuff. So just think about your emotions as you're going through this process. In Chinese medicine, we also connect the liver to some emotions, and those emotions specifically are irritability, frustration, and anger. And so if there are lots of those emotions that are occurring fairly frequently, it can be a sign that we actually do need to support that liver from an energetic perspective. So that's something to consider. When we are eliminating, we are also letting go of stuff. And I think that there's an emotional component to this as well. So think about allowing yourself ways in which you can actually eliminate and let go of some thoughts and maybe old patterns. Get sweaty. We talked about the importance of exercise, very important. And as I said, it can be through a number of avenues, but we need to be sweating for the skin. Move your body and your lymphatic system. So any form of exercise. And then colonics. So you maybe have heard of colon hydrotherapy or colonics before. I really only like those in very severe cases of fecal impaction or constipation, severe constipation. Basically, it's using water through the anus, up the rectum and the large intestine to flush out the fecal matter. And it's pretty invasive. It can be really harsh on some people's body, and it's not always necessary. So I would only really suggest that in pretty severe cases. That is basically all the tools to get you started. So you guys are here, so you're definitely going to receive my 5-day cleanse challenge. We are, oh, there we go. So you're getting a bonus challenge. I'm going to send that out over email. It will be sent to all participants as well as a replay. And I'm going to just expand on more of those tools. So in your emails, you'll see some recipes and some sample meal plans. I'll give you the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen, as well as more information about how to do dry brushing and why it's important, dry skin brushing and why it's important. So I'm going to give you lots of information about those extra tools. But I do thank you for being here today and sitting with me. And if you have any questions, thank you. Thanks for everyone for being here. If there's any other questions, then feel free to shoot them my way. Awesome. Thanks so much, you guys. And look forward to some emails coming over the next few days for your challenge. Take care.